Alrighty. So this is our first live stream, which means I am figuring this out as we go. This is the training wheels live stream. It probably would have helped me to go watch what other people do, but I did not. So you'll have to sit there and listen to me talk and ramble instead. But I was thinking for this first one, we can maybe just do like a bit of a question and answers thing about the game. And we could maybe go into like some history behind the game, or we could go into like the roadmap of the future. My first co-dev, Ryan, who co-created the game with me, was just sending me old like paper documents that I had drawn when we first started thinking up the game, which would be cool to share, but I don't know if there's an easy way for me to share links here without like having to go upload them somewhere. Maybe in I don't know. We'll take it 1 minute at a time. But for now, does anybody have any particular questions about darkwebSTREAMER? Anything anyone has wanted to know? And I've done the streaming thing before. I'm aware that I may ask a question and no one will reply, and then I'll sit there awkwardly, then have to start talking again. So I'm going to preempt that by acknowledging that's going to happen, or that may happen, and then it'll be less awkward when it does. Yeah, that's my strategy for dealing with streaming. You make it pre-awkward. But also Miles. I'm sure Miles has questions about the roadmap, which I haven't actually finished elucidating yet, which is on my to-do list for today. I also have 2 cups here. But that's not very helpful for the developer live stream, Miles. I hear you're about to be fired if you're a CIA agent in the chat. You know, I'm very open about my crimes. My crimes? Am I the boss here? How much planning? Oh my lord. The question alone is traumatic, to be honest. Probably near incomprehensible amounts. I mean, we've been working on the game for, I hate to say it, but I think we're coming up on 4 years, if not 4 years already. And like, just, I would say in the first 3 to 6 months, probably the first 3 months of the game, I had about like 40,000 words of documentation and planning, and like so many pages, just like handwritten, hand sketched pages of concept art and like designs and like weird, you know, conspiracy theorist like names and concepts with like strings going to each one. So I should probably like get some of those laying around here somewhere. But yeah, and then we have our darkwebSTREAMER team server, which anyone who's been in there will attest is one of the most frightening Discord servers you've ever been in, because it has like maxed out channels and just like so many things in every channel. And then I have my personal project documents, which I actually don't show the rest of the team until it's time to start implementing them, because I don't want to scare the shit out of everybody else working on it because of how like intensely detailed all of the game is. So I'm like, it will feel scary and impossible if you all confront it all at once, but if we take it like this much at a time, it feels sane and doable. So yes, that's a very long way to answer your question, but yeah, every week I am making new plans and making specs and doing concept art and rehauling bits of the game. So it's a very large, very detailed game, and we still have like a fuck ton to do. So yeah. Where did the idea of the game come from? It's a short answer and a long answer. So the short answer is the game came to me in a flash of inspiration. I was watching a movie, like I was just sitting alone on the couch at probably 2 a.m. and I put this random like B, C grade horror movie on. It was called Dybbuk Box, The Haunting of Chris Chambers. And it was like a found footage movie, which is my favorite kind of film. And it opened with like all this news footage of this trend of unboxing boxes that people had bought on the dark web. And I was really intrigued and I actually did look it up, and that is a real thing. So apparently like people sell like haunted boxes on the dark web that are sealed and have mysterious or paranormal things in them, and people buy them, and like on YouTube they do unboxings of these boxes. So I was super fascinated by that concept. I was really surprised I hadn't heard of it before, because I am such a big dweeb for things like that, like internet culture and kind of like paranormal, supernatural stuff on the internet. I've like been researching for years. And the movie itself was really fascinating because it featured a YouTube streamer, and the found footage was actually like the format was told through a series of YouTube videos that he was recording. And I was intrigued because it showed that when he bought the box, he had like this kind of visceral, like instinctive reaction to it, that it was like something in him could sense that something about this box genuinely was wrong and he genuinely shouldn't open it. But he also had like kind of hyped up to his stream, he's going to do this big unboxing, his fans were really excited about it, you know, it's going to get him followers and money. So I loved the way the film engaged with like this paradox of like trepidation versus like, I guess it's not really a paradox, but a juxtaposition, you know, of do I go with safety or do I go with like fame and money? And yeah, so that as soon as I finished watching that movie, I had like all these wheels in motion, and literally in like a flash, I saw an entire video game just like download into my brain. I like saw what it would look like. I saw how it should work. It was like I had been given this gift of a video game. That was weird because I was not a game developer. I did not make games. I did not know how to make games. I was a writer, graphic designer. I was in university at the time getting my double major in English and anthropology. So, yeah, it was very interesting. It's funny because that's the short answer, but there's a longer answer that, you know, involves a flash of inspiration, is really a combination of many, many inspirations and interests that have come before. So there is a lot of, you know, backstory to why these things interested me, and you know, things I've been creating all my life that kind of led to this moment. But yeah, let's stick with the movie idea for now. Did anything happen during the project that caught me off guard? Dude, so many things have happened. It's very interesting. Hi, Matt. It's very interesting being a first-time game dev, especially working on a really big project, especially working on a project that kind of like has been in the public eye as well, because I'm learning very like publicly. All my failures are out for the world to see, which is okay. I think, you know, you should not be ashamed of learning or failing or learning from failure. So, but yeah, let me think of things that have gone wrong. I mean, probably the biggest struggle I had to grapple with was, when my original co-dev and I, when we started making darkwebSTREAMER as purely a for fun project, like neither of us knew how to make a video game, so we were just like, you know, haha, this is so much fun, which it was, and it is. But then we like posted it on social media just as a like, hey, like check out this cool thing we're making, not really thinking anything of it. And then yeah, I kind of just like blew up from there. We had like tons of publishers interested. We started kind of accumulating like a fan base. And all of a sudden it was like we realized that what we had was actually really special. And I was in a position in my life where, you know, I was coming out of university and I had the flex to start working on this full time. And, you know, I have a husband who supports me and this project, so I'm very fortunate. Whereas my co-dev had to work a full-time job, and he was basically like, you know, the project deserves more. And so he stepped back. He was the programmer primarily, like the primary programmer. So I had to basically find someone who could dedicate more time to the project. And, you know, we were at least a year and a half, maybe 2 years into development at the time. So it was really difficult to find someone who had the abilities, really the capabilities to come into this really complex project in progress, which is this game. I really think, you know, people don't try games like this because it requires such a specific subset of skills, and like linguistics is actually a major one. You know, having a really complex understanding of linguistics and how you can program linguistics and systematize them. And, you know, like I have a background in that, but really our programmer needs to as well, in order to be able to have the kinds of conversations we need to have to solve problems and address particular designs. So, yeah, like just the procedural generation aspect, the narrative generation aspect, the like very deep AI simulation. And let me preface, when I say AI, I mean, you know, traditional AI, not generative AI. All our AI systems were designed by myself and programmed by the programmers we've had on the project, as well as myself at times. So yeah, learning how to like navigate industry and how to vet people for the project and how to like replace kind of a key team member when we're partway through development, and it's a very tricky one. I'd say that was probably the hardest, scariest moment, because it was very much like an existential threat of, oh my god, is this game gonna survive because I can't do it alone, as much as I would, you know, love to be able to. I mean, it's more fun working with people for sure, but I would rather be able to do it myself than it die. Luckily, we don't have to deal with any of those problems because we found Tony, our current lead programmer, who is fantastic. You Jellyman asked, it sounds like you have a lot of ideas. What are we doing to draw a line in the sand and avoid feature creep? It's a great question. Are you pushing things to DLC, sequel updates, cutting, etc.? Yeah, it is a really good question. And it's something that, like many devs, I have struggled with. You have to ask hard questions all the time. The way, I think I am quite a perfectionist. I'd say it's like one of my biggest flaws, and by that I mean I'm the kind of perfectionist that I won't let anyone see anything if I don't think it's like immaculate. Well, usually I won't, and that means usually, there's no such thing as perfect. So I've spent much of my life hiding all the things I've worked on because I'm like, it's not good enough, even though, other people might think it's actually quite good. So I maintain this, that darkwebSTREAMER would not exist, or you guys would not know about it today if it hadn't started purely as a for fun project, because it was almost like a jerk between me and Ryan, my co-creator. There was no reputation attached. We thought it was quite ridiculous that we were trying to make a game as people who had never made a game before and didn't know how, and had no background in it. Hello, Milash. So yeah, I didn't think anything of putting stuff about darkwebSTREAMER out there, putting screenshots out there, etc., because I didn't think anyone was even paying attention. But then when we started building a community, I guess I was more incentivized to share things with people who were genuinely interested in the work that we were doing. So some of that perfectionism kind of fell away. But yeah, in terms of to avoid project creep, my main thing that I do is have a running document of DLC. So, and we always call darkwebSTREAMER a living game, and I think we probably don't push that enough. I call it a living game because of two reasons. Well, kind of three. One is that we do plan on supporting the game, a long time after release, because it's just really fun and it's a cool art project, and I've spent a lot of my life on it now. It's kind of like my baby. You don't abandon your baby just because they turn 18 and move out. Not that people move out at 18 anymore, for good reason. Well, privileged people anyway. DLC is my big thing there. I'm like, oh, I have a really great idea and I would love to put it in the game. It would be so cool. But I know that we have kind of, we have to get the game out the door eventually. And also we only have so many resources to stay in development so long before we need to basically, keep the project self-funded. So we have a core roadmap that is and I've had this for pretty much the start of the game, which is these are the features that the game needs to have to be considered feature complete in terms of fully reflect the original vision. And then pretty much everything else is it's either going to be a game update after the game is released, or if it's a bigger kind of systems edition, we will do that as DLC. So the main one that, people joke about sometimes, but I've had kind of an eye on for a while, is like the dating sim DLC. So letting you like date the NPCs that you meet in the game. We do have some relationship simulation. You can have different kinds of relationships with characters in the game right now, but there are no romance options, and they actually can have relationships with each other, but any kinds of romance aren't like deeply simulated. So that's a big one that I'm looking forward to doing. I think we may also do a like leave the house DLC. Which is like, you can go out of your apartment and go do other things outside and come back. Thank you, Matt. Have I experienced, oh, so hello screen. Have you experienced any spooky or haunted things myself that inspired the game? I absolutely have. And it's funny, I laugh because like, I've done tons of interviews for this game, and people ask like adjacent questions, but they never ask that question. And sometimes I bring it up to people, or like bring it up to the internet, where I'm like, no one's ever actually asked me and got the story of like my backstory that inspired the game. Dark Web Touchgrass. I may have to write that down as a potential DLC name, because that's fantastic. So yeah, spooky haunted things. Oh man, do I want to go into the whole story? It's a longish story. Can I condense it? I'm really bad at condensing things. I think it's the perfectionist in me, where I'm like, no, if I don't share every single detail, then I will have misrepresented the situation. But yeah, I've had like honestly quite a few experiences in my life, starting from quite young, that people would consider supernatural or paranormal. And when I was young, I was really just, that stuff felt like a natural piece of the world to me, because I had experiences. And then when I got older, I kind of, got to know the world, and I've always, I've been like an intelligent, logical person, and that was a big part of my personality. So when I became a teenager, I kind of like was like, no, I'm all about rigorous evidence, etc., etc. So I kind of like, I didn't stop believing, but I was just much more skeptical of like 99% of like anything supernatural or paranormal than I used to be. And I'd say like the main thing that changed me was when I was 19. My boyfriend had recently moved into my childhood home with me because he was from America. So he moved to Australia to be with me, and we were looking for our own place. So he was staying with me and my mom, and we were in my bedroom, and my cat had actually just been murdered, which is really sad. I was really depressed and heartbroken at the time. Someone had crushed up painkillers and fed it to her in milk. So I was just like in like the worst headspace. And yeah, I started like seeing shadows, like strange shadows that were like, they looked like figures, and they didn't quite look like shadows. They looked like more solid than a shadow, but it was like a black figure that was like vaguely translucent. Anyway, so I was seeing like cat-shaped figures for a little bit, and then I started seeing like people-shaped figures, like grown adult size, and they would like just go through my bedroom. And I kept telling like my boyfriend and my mom, the people in the house, I was like, have you been like, have you seen this? Like, I keep seeing these things. And they were like, no, no, no. And I don't know if they thought I was, like, going nuts or what. And then I had this incident where I was lying in bed and I had just turned off the light and something, like, jumped on my bed. And I thought it was a cat. But I looked down there and, like, my cat was, like, lying down, like, very comfortably, like they'd been there for a while. And I was like, that's weird, but, like, I'm just gonna ignore it. And then it kept happening. And, like, the more it happened, every time it happened again, the worse it got. Hello, Jess. So, yeah, it was, like, the jumping on the bed was getting, like, stronger and stronger and heavier, and I started paying attention, and, like, it would happen when there were, like, no cats in the room. So something would just jump on my bed when I was going to bed and turn the light off. And my boyfriend was sleeping with me, and I would, like, be like, dude, like, wake the fuck up. Did you not feel that? But, yeah, I always went to bed later than him, so he was always asleep. And then one day, so all this is happening at the same time. There are, like, these, like, shadow figures, like, regularly going through my room, and now all of a sudden things are, like, jumping on my bed at night in the dark when I'm trying to go to sleep. And I'm aware this sounds crazy, but, like, 100%, I swear on my son's life this happened. And then one day I'm talking to, like, my mom and my boyfriend, and it was kind of like, I'm here and my mom is here in the doorway and my husband's, like, over here, so we're, like, in a triangle. And as we're, like, in the middle of conversation, a, like, shadow person comes in through my doorway, goes between all of us, and then just kind of, like, dissipates into the other corner of the room. And we all stop dead. And, like, we were just, like, staring at each other. And then finally I'm like, you guys saw that, right? And they were like, yes. And I'm like, this is what I've been talking about. This is what I've been seeing. So finally I had validation. And then really soon after that, I'm going to skip ahead. There are some other incidents, but basically one night, I had started being afraid to go to sleep because when I would go to bed and go to sleep, frequently I was having something, like, jump on the bed. It was freaking the shit out of me. And I'm not an easily scared person. So, yeah, I'm, like, super hesitant to turn off the light at this point. It's happened, like, maybe 6 times now. And this all happened within, like, maybe a month or 6 weeks. And yeah, so I remember, like, scanning the room to be like, okay, I know where everything is. There are no cats in here. There's nothing in here. I am going to turn off this light, but I'm gonna be, like, super on edge and super paranoid. And I'm gonna be, like, high alert. And I, like, really hesitantly turn off the light, and I lie down in bed, and I'm kind of tense. And because it had happened, like, the last 2 nights, maybe. And then I'm, like, waiting, and, like, probably after, like, 3 minutes, like, nothing happens. And it was, like, just when I kind of started to be like, okay, that something, like, jumped on the bed, but it didn't just, like, jump on the bed. It felt like a large man had jumped almost, like, from the ceiling and had landed on top of me on all fours, like, not, like, you know, crushing me, but, like, kind of, like, holding themselves up, but, like, their hands next to my head and their, like, knees and shins like down by my hips, and the whole bed like rocked up and down, and I just like freaked the fuck out. I like ripped on the light. I like screamed at my boyfriend to like get the hell up. I start like tearing the sheets off. I take the quilt cover from like the quilt. I'm like tearing my room apart. I'm just like, what the fuck? And yeah, so I obviously did not go back to sleep that night, and I don't think I slept for like 2 days. I just could not. And then I was like, I can't live like this. So I started researching stuff. I was basically like looking on, you know, the online classifieds. Give me a sec. Sorry about that. That was probably loud. But yeah, I started looking up like demonologists or like exorcisms and stuff like that on like basically the Australian equivalent of Craigslist. And I couldn't find anything, which is kind of crazy to me. So I'm just like looking up, you know, stuff online, trying to find, and there's like tons of people. If you actually look this up, there are so many posts that have really similar things where people are just like begging for help and like are experiencing these things, and like we don't know what to do. But like there were a lot of like kind of complicated things. There were like rituals and like, you know, you've got to do this and do that at midnight and get this thing, and I'm like, this is crazy. But I remember just reading a post on a forum, and it was someone replying to like people giving these like really long-winded answers, and the person was like, what did they say? They just said that you need to tell this entity that this is your house and your space, and they need to leave. They're not welcome there. And when you tell them this, you just announce it out loud to the room. And the most important thing is that you cannot be afraid, because these things feed on fear. And they won't listen to you or respect you if you're scared or afraid. You have to kind of find it in you to like demand that they go and like have the courage to protect your space. So I was like, well, this sounds way too easy, but you know, I may as well try this because everything else is really long-winded and I can do this right now. So I did. I basically just like gathered myself, and I announced to the room that I was choosing not to be afraid of these things anymore, and they weren't welcome and they needed to leave. And really anticlimactic, but nothing ever happened again. Like no more shadow people, no more things jumping on the bed. My house we always joked about it being haunted because there were like stuff that would, like we would hear footsteps in the night and everyone would like run to the hallway and it would be totally empty and we'd all be like, did you hear that? But yeah, like all of that stuff just stopped like forever that day. So yeah, that was my very long story about things I've experienced. And yeah, there's been like a lot of other stuff, but obviously that's other stories to tell for other times. But yeah, I would say I do draw a lot on these experiences I've had when writing how the player feels when they're experiencing things. And yeah, I have kind of invoked my own personal experiences in certain things that you experience in the game. So what part of the project do I feel most motivated about? Honestly, there are there's a lot of parts I'm really excited about. Probably like the two I would say most is our NPP modeling. NPP is what our team calls NPCs. NPC is non-player character. We call them NPPs for non-player person. And we do that because we do have like really deep modeling of these characters in the game. They are like procedurally generated, but there's a lot of care and thought and like my personal background in anthropology, the things I've learned have all gone into modeling these characters and their lives and their identities and their motivations and things quite deeply. So for people who have played the build, if you've played it at a show or you've been a playtester, I will say that stuff like really is not in yet. I've got like copious designs outside of the game, and we've like tested the modeling early on, so we know what works and we know it's really good. But it's just like it's a lot of labor to get all that stuff in a kind of like a functional place in the game. So we've been saving it till the later part of development when all of our other systems are done. But yeah, I'm really excited for people to experience these characters that should feel a lot more real. They have their own language, their own linguistic styles. They, have their own personalities, likes, dislikes. Every, character in the game lives a day alongside you, the player. So they are changing as people and their lives are changing as the game progresses. And yeah, you're going to be able to chat with them and cool things like that. So I am really excited to get to that part and have people experience it as well, because probably the main reason I made it is because I always personally wanted that in a video game. I always, to me, the most interesting thing about being alive tends to be my interactions with other people. So I've always wanted a game that made interactions with the characters I'm interacting with really interesting and feel meaningful. So that's something that I want to kind of give to people in a game as something that I always felt like I was missing. And then the other thing I guess I think about, part of the project I feel most motivated about, I'm really excited about our infinite internet. So we have procedurally generated an entire internet, which is the first time in the world someone's done that, which is I think quite cool. And it's working in a rudimentary way. We do currently have a procedurally generated infinite internet, but it's going to require a lot of content added to it in terms of art and a lot more kind of types of pages and stuff. And yeah, that leans also on our NPPs, so the web pages are written in their vocabularies, the language they use. It reflects their personal interests and their personalities. So yeah, I'm really excited about that. And then the last part, probably the thing I'm most excited about, is just our modding tools, because we've put just I'd say probably at least half of our development resources into making really strong, robust, easy mod tools for people. So when I call darkwebSTREAMER a living game, part of that is because we plan to keep the game updated for as long as we can after release. But also we really want to have a kind of thriving mod community and not just like of programmers or like programmer adjacent people, but we really want artists and writers and like other similar kinds of creatives to be able to come in and create experiences to share with other people. So we've been putting a lot of effort into making tools for people to make their own stories and their own in-game experiences that doesn't require like programming, etc., to make that really accessible. So I really, really want to see what people do with that, because like I mod all my games. I love like modding games. I love seeing what people make. I love seeing the way that fans shape games. So I really hope that people will pick them up and I get to see people do that with something that I made. Let's see. I do, like, Ouija board was tempting when I was getting haunted in response to, if you have supernatural roommates, you may as well get to know them. Let's see, Miles, he said, when I was a kid, I'd have many similar experiences, and it drove me to walk through the world in absolute anxious wreck. That's, yeah, it does, when you feel like you're being targeted by something with evil intent, it does. Like, I am not at all an anxious person. I never have been. But probably the most anxious I have ever been was when that was happening to me. Like, because you feel like it's so out of your control in like every possible way, because you're like, I can't like see these things, I can't interact with these things, I have no language to communicate about these things, and even if I did, no one believes me. So it's just like, you're like, am I crazy? Like, can I even get help on this? Will this ever stop? What the hell is happening? It sucks. That is interesting, thinking of yours as an amplifier or conduit. Yeah, and I know what you mean about grounded in yourself, Miles. I think like that was kind of part of the people who said sure, no fear. Hello, Nick. But yeah, like, I think when you refuse to have fear, that is a very mindful way of like gathering your own like mental discipline and focus and like, you know, strength and courage. So like getting control of your own mind back is very important. And I'm saying this and I'm realizing like that is why darkwebSTREAMER we have two stats that are like your health stat. We have health, but we also have lucidity, which is, it's basically your sanity meter, but I call it lucidity to kind of represent the, like, this sense of insanity. So like, I know when I was really, really frightened, I didn't feel particularly lucid because of that. Like, you're so nervous, you're so like looking for things around you, you're not being like present in the moment, you're not being mindful. So like the closer you get to madness, the less lucidity you have about your own mind and life. Let's see, you Jellyman, how do we balance procedural generation versus handcrafted content? That is a really great question. I try to balance, like, I try to favor procedural generation as much as we can without completely taking choice and strategy away from the player, which is an interesting, you know, it's actually quite a difficult design balance to have. So I would say almost everything you encounter in the game is procedurally generated in terms of like the world itself is procedurally generated when the game is created. So characters are generated, items are generated, like crafting recipes and rituals are generated. So you won't be able to Google like how to make stuff because it changes every single time you play the game. And yeah, just like all sorts of things are generated, like the whole web is like generated. Other than, so we have things called services, and services are kind of like, okay, so I'm gonna do a strange aside here, but I swear it'll make sense. I'm a big fan of the game Slay the Spire, and the thing I love about the game is that you kind of like have these predictable mechanics in like, even though you can get a different deck of cards, and that does add a lot of randomness, like the cards themselves remain the same. But what really, really changes your playthrough is the modifiers you get as you progress through the game Slay the Spire. And if you haven't played it, this will make no sense to you. But in Slay the Spire, it's a card build, like a deck building game. You have, you know, it's kind of like Magic the Gathering-ish, where you've got cards with abilities and you're playing against like enemies with cards and abilities, and you're trying to win that battle and progress. But you acquire these items as you go through, kind of like Binding of Isaac, very much like Binding of Isaac actually, that like add like very often quite drastic modifiers to the game that change the way you would play a card or the choices you're making. And I love that kind of like to me it's strategy, where even though it's random, you're forced into different kinds of play styles, so you're forced to adapt based on the things you're getting. So when I was designing darkwebSTREAMER, I knew I wanted to have a mechanic like that. And the way that I added that was by designing things called services. And what a service is basically when you're browsing the web, you can find like different websites that are offering different services. And so a service is basically something you either pay for or you give something in exchange for something in return. So like really simple examples of this is like a doctor. You can find the doctor service or a doctor service, and you can pay a doctor to come and heal you for a bit. Or you can pay a budget doctor to save some money, but they might like, you know, accidentally, you know, snip one of your arteries or something like that. You can see a therapist, similar thing, but for your mental health. We have blackjack. Blackjack is a money-making or a money-losing service. And yeah, there's all sorts of things that can kind of like modify your game and add like permanent modifiers or debuffs or stuff like that. So every time you load the game, all of that changes, and as you browse the web, you find these services at random. So every time you play the game, you're going to have access to different sets of mechanics and modifiers that you can use to practice. Hello, Click. Yeah, so basically that is our Slay the Spire mechanic, but it's a really, really big part of the game. And I think it's really fun to like be browsing the internet and not know what you're going to find, and kind of like hope you're going to find some things, but maybe you get something that you weren't really looking for, but you're like, maybe I can work with this. to me, that like very much encapsulates the experience of being online and looking for things. It's kind of like the sense of discovery, the sense of wonder, and you know, the sense of either pure excitement or pure disappointment, or I guess somewhere in the middle where you're like, meh, I mean, I guess this is kind of interesting. I guess I can do something with this. So yeah, like their services are mostly bespoke right now. We were initially planning on them to be procedurally generated as well, but I think that I do like the idea of people being able to get to know some more fixed characters in the game. So I'm leaning toward keeping them as non-procedurally generated for now. There will also be a few more bespoke events that will probably be much rarer, so almost like Easter egg events. And there will be like bespoke web pages as well that I'm looking at. They're kind of like collectibles in the game. They may be lore pages or things like that to like get to know the world of darkwebSTREAMER a little more. And theirs will be more just kind of like heavily static as well. Malesh asked, AI is seen as a curse word, but naturally that specifically refers to the current trend of using large language model based technologies to replace human creativity. Yes, quite frustrating. I mentioned procedural generation, which is the precursor, was large language models used in any of the internet generation. No, it was not. It was basically like smart procedural generation. I do have a background in something called digital humanities, which is machine learning as applied to the humanities, which, you know, ranges from like creative fields to almost like more like social science type stuff. Yeah, and I did this before the madness of current generative AI. I often talk about how when I was working in the digital humanities, it like ethics was a very, very big part of that field, constantly talked about. And one of the biggest part of ethics in like the kind of like machine learning field was using like only content that you earned, or that was like kind of considered public domain material in your training data. So like the conversations are much more nuanced today because so many more people have been having them, but it was kind of accepted that anything people posted in a public forum was kind of like public content. And by that I mean posted, I mean like text, like things people talked about, etc. They're like word comments. That was considered fair game for like data scraping and training, but private art by artists was absolutely not. It was well understood that those were protected intellectual property, and you should not use that stuff. And so like the beginning of this kind of art generation, I'm just going sideways into vague history lesson, please bear with me. But I've always followed kind of like AI since I was really young. I used to love playing with like early AI experiments when I was like 9 or 10. I spent hours with chatbots, and that interest never left me. And so when the very beginnings of generative art technologies were, I'm sure other people were doing experiments too, but like Google Deep Dream was kind of the big forward movement there. And I played a lot with Google Deep Dream. And it was really great. I recommend, if people aren't familiar, you look it up, because the outputs then were absolutely batshit. It was like falling into an LSD nightmare. But like Google trained on early images it earned, etc., etc. So like all of that generative art at the beginning was really cool and interesting and like amazing technology, because you know, it was made by groups of creatives and, you know, scientists working together to make like an interesting like intelligence project. And then you had people like Midjourney come out and start stealing like work and selling it commercially. And like, from the field I come from, that I honestly thought they would be taken down within like a month. I could not believe when they were up 3 months later. I cannot believe they're still up now. I can't believe the world is like, has just carried on like that's fine. Yeah, it's incredibly unethical, and like the machine learning field I came from like would never have tolerated that. But unfortunately, it made a ton of money, and people are really quick to discard ethics where lots of money is concerned. So that's my side thing. But yeah, so when I brought up that I have a background in this stuff, because there are some things that are quite cool that I learned in that field that I have been able to take into making the game, and like helped me come up with more like innovative designs for stuff like procedural generation and simulation, etc. One of the main things we use is something, and I think in this current iteration of the game, I don't think any is in there, but we have like kind of like experiments that are like outside of the game to like prove systems that we have done this in. But something called sentiment analysis is a very kind of like, in a way it's very simple, but it's very, very effective and effectively used in machine learning a lot. And sentiment analysis is basically looking at language that people have used and saying, the computer basically runs the language through like a filter of like words that are like, have the programmer has told them are good or are positive or are negative, and then it kind of like reads a sentence and says, okay, I think this person is expressing a positive sentiment about this, or I think it's a negative, and then it'll mark it as a positive or a negative statement, and that allows us to respond to the player making a positive or negative sentiment. And when used in something like a game, when you're not really aware that like under the hood stuff is being done, it really feels like there's a level of awareness in the characters and in the game that is quite surprising and quite magical. So yeah, we don't use large language models, but we have borrowed some ethical kind of concepts from around the field to kind of push our systems and technologies forward. In the process of generating the AI, have you had any interactions in the game that surprised you? Any ghosts in the machine? We've actually had so many. There have been so many times that a generation has like freaked us out, or we were like, we don't think we programmed it to do that or say that. I wish I could think of like exact examples. Maybe Ryan can, if Ryan's still here. But yeah, I mean, like, even just, you know, players also will come and tell us that they experienced this thing and it was so scary. And we'll be like, I don't remember putting that in the game. Like, I'm trying to, like, rack my brain for how they could have had that experience or where that could have come from. And, like, I really just can't place it. And, like, I'm the one who, like, you know, makes all the experiences and writes them. So, like, I should know. It's not like someone else might have done it. But, you know, the bigger the game gets because of the procedural generation, it, like, becomes harder and harder to keep a handle on all the possibilities in the game. So at a certain point it does kind of feel like it takes on a life of its own. Yeah. So the one I always bring up that just sticks with me though, it's not really a paranormal one, but I just remember writing an about me generator for the game that let NPPs tell you about, you know, like, themselves via their web pages. So they, like, will write these web pages and they can choose to tell you things about themselves, or, you know, describe on the web page stuff about themselves. And I remember one of the outputs I got was, like, it said, and this is really horrible, it said 11, female, pregnant AF, and then had, like, the next line was hate my parents. And I was like, this is bad. This is very confronting. I was not expecting to have a bit of an existential crisis while testing my about me generator. So I was really passionate about allowing, like, young people to, like, exist in our game world. I personally have a lot of hang-ups about not hang-ups, but I am upset about the fact that we erase children so much in our daily lives and in our media and in our explorations of the world. Like, we're a very adult-focused world, but, like, children are just as much a part of this world as we are, a part of the internet as we are, and, you know, have equally complex lives and personalities. And, you know, as someone, the internet was, you know, something that was really important to me when I was young, and all these, like, supernatural, paranormal spaces, they were, like, where I lived when I was, like, 10 or 11. So I wanted to really, like, accurately capture the fact that the internet is not just, like, teens and adults, but, like, it is also inhabited by children and all sorts of people. But sadly, like many things, this, as a commercial game, and I hate saying that, because, like, I hate that commercialness plays any part in any art that I make. And it's not purely, like, a commercial consideration, but I think I was just uncomfortable with the idea of the possibility of accidentally simulating, you know, like, sexual abuse against children. So I very rapidly went and kind of made the minimum age, like, 15 or 16 in the game, which I'm still not, like, super comfortable with, but I suspect that in order to model children in the game while still putting all the content that we want to in, it would just be a lot of extra legwork to make sure we kept, like, children separate from various possibilities of generation. So I'm like, for practical reasons, we have erased children from the game, and that breaks my heart. Yeah, so we definitely, blackjack is gonna take a more finessing, although blackjack is definitely intended to be something that potentially makes you suffer. So, like, blackjack for me, when I designed it, was more of either a Hail Mary for someone who, like, really needs money and is, like, really praying that they can get themselves out of this by gambling. I think that's a very real world scenario, and I like when it's kind of easy to model things that might happen in real life. But yeah, and I also just thought it's cool to like have that as a potential character, like an identity that you can be. So, you know, if you do gamble too much, you do become addicted to gambling, or you do have a, you know, high chance of becoming addicted, and then you need to gamble more. And, you know, I like that kind of, to me, it's kind of like elegant modeling where it's like kind of accurately simulating the hole that people get into. Yeah, that's a really fun one for me. So I want to make sure that that feels really good, because I think it is a nice story to potentially have in the game. Like, when I think about like designing darkwebSTREAMER, I always think of it in terms of the potential stories that people can have. Like, when I design a piece of content, I'm like, what story might someone be able to get out of this? So, you know, if you think of something like, you can be asthmatic, and you need to like buy inhalers if you have asthma to make sure that your asthma attacks don't kill you. So I'm thinking of someone who like has really low health and they really need to get an inhaler because they're gonna die soon if they don't, but they can't afford an inhaler, and they really need to make some money fast, but they're too afraid to stream in case streaming like damages them. So they turn to blackjack to stream, or to get some money to afford either their medication. They start gambling, and then they gamble all their money away and become addicted to gambling in what started as an innocent effort to get themselves medication to keep them healthy. So yeah, just trying to add things to the game that account for interesting stories is really like the heart of designing for darkwebSTREAMER. So let me know if anyone has any more questions. I'm just checking some notifications that I have. Let's see. Oh god, I lost my stream. I lost it. There we go. Well, we have been going for an hour now, so actually over an hour. And I think half of that was a ghost story. So, unless anyone has any more questions, I may hop off for now. So we have fun and interesting things to talk about next week in our next developer live stream. I'm giving it like 10 seconds. I said I'd give it 10 seconds, but I didn't start counting. I mean, I assume it's been 10. Alrighty. Well, thank you everyone for hanging out. It was nice to finally get this going. I will be more organized next time. I'm still tossing up between whether we want to do this on YouTube or Twitch, or we might try to do kind of like a double stream to both places. But yeah, I will be here every week, same time. Save some questions for me. And yeah, I will catch you on the flip.